All right, good afternoon, everyone. We're going to get started with today's policy session of the Phoenix City Council. We'll begin today's policy session at City Council. I'll turn it over to council members and see if they have any information and or follow-up requests. Would any council member like to provide information or follow-up requests? Councilwoman Williams, please.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to let everybody know we had the grand reopening of the Deer Valley Petroglyphs Preserve at 35th and Deer Valley. And in case you didn't know, you can actually go to the Phoenix Public Library, use your library card, and you can get 2 cultural passes and attend free. And it's a great place. It's the largest site in Maricopa County for petroglyphs. They date back 7,000 years, and so I encourage you to go see it. Last Saturday, we had a shred-a-thon and drug take-back. I want to thank Black Mountain Precinct and the Deer Valley Community Center. We had 7 of those huge boxes PD did of pills and medication people turned in, and nearly 40 cans of shred-a-thon. So very successful, and I want to thank everybody who cleaned out their closets and cleaned out their medicine chest and brought it to us, and it didn't go down the sink. That's all, Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Other members of the council? Councilwoman Stark, please.
Thank you, Mayor. First, I want to thank the councilwoman. I took advantage of the shred-a-thon, and I really do. It was very, very busy when I stopped by. I just wanted to announce tomorrow we're having our District 3 January coffee chat, and it will be held at Mesquite Library, where I'm sure I'll run into Councilman Waring, because he's there 3 times a week. It starts at 8 o'clock, and it will go to 10 a.m., and we're having a presentation from our Chief Sustainability Officer, Mark Hartman. And if you want to attend, you can always RSVP us, so call us at our office, 602-262-7441, or you can email us at council.district.3@phoenix.gov. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Councilwoman. Other members of the council? Councilman Waring, please.
Thank you, Mayor. So on Thursday night, February 8th, this really pertains to the whole city, so it's not just my district, at Horizon High School, which is the southeast corner of Greenway and 56th Street, 5601 East Greenway. We're going to have a meeting with the FAA to discuss the city's big victory in its court case. This was one of the things that the city requested. I certainly personally requested. I think there's 3 meetings around the city, but this is the one in the northeast section of the valley, which has been affected because of the impact on this Scottsdale Airport and so forth. So if you're listening and you were upset about the FAA and what happened in 2014, this is the chance to have the airing of grievances. I believe they're supposed to take questions and answer all comments and so forth. I guess I don't know exactly what the format is. It's the FAA that's running the meeting. It starts at 5 o'clock. It's supposed to run to 8 o'clock at, again, Horizon High School. So please attend if you have had concerns. It was a big issue for, I think, all of us. You don't have to live in the northeast part of Phoenix, so if you find out about when the other meetings are, and I'd let other council members, who live in those areas explain when those meetings are. But please come to one of the 3 meetings. If you can make it to this one, please come and express your frustration should they ever try to bring back plans again of this nature. And also just what you'd like to see. We really need to know. I think it would be helpful to all of us up here too to sort of know what people would like to see going forward. So again, February 8th, it's a Thursday night, 5 p.m. start, but you could just be there somewhere between 5 p.m. and 8 p.m. at Horizon High School. We'd love to have you out. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Other members of the council? Vice Mayor.
Good afternoon. I would like to thank those that attended the MLK breakfast. It was a huge success and a large turnout. We raised over $100,000 in scholarship funds, so all those dollars will go to scholarship funds. I especially want to thank Phoenix Union High Schools, the swing band, choir, cheerleading, drumline, step team, and the poetry, Jean Blue, and everyone at OIC who made it happen and made it a big celebration. In addition, I have the 20th Street Improvement Project public meeting on Thursday, February 15th from 6 to 8 p.m. at Camel View Elementary School, that is 2002 East Campbell Avenue, in the cafeteria to give any comments on a proposed plan for 20th Street. The 20th Street corridor from Glendale to Lincoln to Grand Canal was identified as a priority corridor for implementation in the city's City of Phoenix Bicycle Master Plan, and that was adopted November 2014, so I hope to see people there. Then this Friday, we are opening, or what I call, a global market pop-up store. So please join me Friday at noon over here at Cityscape. This is a community engagement project which was established to help local refugees become self-sufficient through entrepreneurship and professional development. The shop will be open all throughout the month of May, so you can come over there for Valentine's, Monday through Saturday from 10 a.m. to 6 p.m. A large variety of goods will be available for sale on site, including international sweets, soap and organic body care, glass and woodwork, canvas paintings, candles, cups, plates, coasters, aprons and oven mittens, and table covers, and much more. 100% of the proceeds goes directly to the individual refugee vendor. I also want to thank ASU School of Social Work graduate student interns Aaliyah Almadid and Megan McDermott for coming up with the project and their hard work and for making it a reality. It's been a project in process. And as Councilman Waring, he spoke about the FAA community workshops. One will be at Maryvale High School on the 6th of February, Cesar Chavez High School on the 7th, and of course, Horizon High School on the 8th. Please join us. We are asking for the Central Phoenix. We are requesting to the FAA to add an additional meeting for the Central Phoenix area. And finally, we lost Bishop Alex Thomas. And Bishop, it was very interesting for me. We lost him, and I attended the services, and it was a great service because it was a homegoing to Bishop. And there was a lot of laughter, some tears, but really it was a celebration of his life and what he did within his 50 years. And the interesting thing was I saw Bishop at the candlelight vigil for MLK on that Sunday, and he was sitting there, and I was getting ready to leave, and I got up and I said, "Hey, Bishop, how are you?" And we're in the middle of service, and he says, "Laura, look at you." And I said, "Yeah, Bishop, what's going on?" He says, "You're doing some good things in our community." And I said, "Thank you, Bishop." And I said, "Look at you, Bishop. Look at where have you been and what have you been doing?" And he says, "Girl, I've just been living the life." And I said, "Okay." And so those were the last words that I had with Bishop's. And so that's the memory I will have with him. It's a great loss, but as yesterday in the services, he did his work that he needed to do, and he was called to the Lord. So please prayers for his family.
Thank you very much, Vice Mayor. Other members of the council, comments or follow-up requests? Councilman Nowakowski, please.
Thank you, Mayor. This past Saturday, my office and Mi Familia Vota hosted a citizenship workshop. They filled out information and citizenship applications. So I want to thank Mi Familia Vota, all those attorneys that volunteered, and all the people that helped out to make this a great event. I also like to thank all the volunteers that came out on Martin Luther King holiday to have a day on, giving back to the community, cleaning up our parks in District 7, helping out with the elderly and all that, all the different service projects that we had. So once again, thank you all for participating, and also to the Vice Mayor for all her help in making the breakfast a successful breakfast. So thank you, Laura, for all that and helping to raise money for the scholarship. Also this last week, Jim Waring, Sal DeCiccio, and myself were at a groundbreaking of 1.1 million square feet of warehouses. It's just incredible, right off of the I-10 and 83rd Avenue, and it's going to be a great project, bringing in about $70 million of investments in the city of Phoenix. So this is going to be one of the largest industrial parks in our city of Phoenix. So it's great to have this park right in the west side of Phoenix where jobs are really needed. So thank you, both of my colleagues, for showing up and being a part of that great history for the west side of Phoenix. Also, tax season's here, and for all those individuals that need help with their taxes, the City of Phoenix Human Service Department is offering free taxes. So if you need some help preparing and filing your e-files and to help out those low-income areas, come on down. You can look us up on www.phoenix.gov for more information on that tax preparations in different areas in the communities that they're at. This Saturday, we're going to have the Levine Community Parade, so we invite everybody to come on out. That's right off of 43rd Avenue in Dobbins. It goes up to about 53rd. I know that Kate's always out there, and I guess Michael's going to be helping us out this year too. And it's a great event, so if you live out there in the Levine area, or if you want to enjoy a great parade, come on down to 43rd Avenue and Dobbins. It starts about 10 o'clock, so come on down. And the following weekend, at February 10th, is basically the 66th annual barbecue for the Levine Barbecue. So it's one of the best barbecues in the state. So if you love barbecue, come on down and enjoy it. It's a new location. It's at Cesar Chavez Park this year. So we moved it because the event's gotten so large that it was at Corona Ranch for the last 3 years. So this year we're moving it to Cesar Chavez Park. Plenty of parking, plenty of grass, and the location is just perfect for this type of event. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you so much, Councilman. Other members of the council? Councilman, please.
I'm looking forward to joining Councilman Nowakowski at the Levine Community Parade. We're going to be partnering with Spaces of Opportunity, a great partnership with the Desert Botanical Garden, Roosevelt School District, and the Tiger Mountain Foundation to share some information about some of the great work we are doing on the south side. Also join my colleagues in celebrating the life of Bishop Thomas. His amazing service to our city is really worth commendation, a once-in-a-generation leader, whether it be helping our police department or serving as one of our pillar chairs for the My Brother's Keeper initiative. I really enjoyed working with him and seeing how much even the leaders in our nation's capital were impressed by what he did, a well-known leader, and want to thank Mayor Stanton for delivering a great tribute on behalf of the city and all of the council colleagues. Tomorrow we're going to be honoring the incomparable Mary Moore with a playground dedication, and thanks to the Phoenix Parks Board for approving that. If you don't know Mary, she is a tireless community advocate for our elementary school district in the Balts area, AmeriCorps Vista program, and so many others, many years of service, and we're glad that we have a good opportunity to recognize a small bit of the work she has done for our community. District 8, we are also really enjoying having Venture Madness in town and have venture capitalists from all over, mostly the West, looking at the great startups in our community and a few from neighboring communities, and hopefully there are some great deals being done as we speak in District 8. Also wanted to congratulate the Public Works Department for 10 years of the Bag Central program, giving people the opportunity to recycle their plastic grocery bags, the dry cleaning bags, even the bags your bread come in. So please remember to use that and take advantage of that program. And also want to join my colleagues in encouraging people to come out to the FAA meetings. 3 is not enough, and we're encouraging them to do more, including in some of the parts of the city that are closer to the airport. But 3 is what we have right now, and I hope to see many people there. Thank you, Mayor.
All right, thank you very much. The only thing I add is that...
Mayor Mack.
Oh, Councilman, please, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. I also think you did a great job with the tribute to Bishop Thomas. It was a great service. I don't know how many people were there, tens of thousands of people, which was pretty amazing. And so lots of great stories, and to a great person, great leader. Fortunately, so many people has heard the bishop preach, and so I think you wouldn't have to go very far from this location to find someone who's been impacted and influenced by Bishop Thomas, and I think that, you know, I think that way of thinking and treating one another will continue. I want to thank our friends over at Coplex for inviting me out for the ribbon cutting last week. Coplex has made their arrival and has officially moved to Phoenix. They are now housed at Galvanize. It is a top 7 startup accelerator. They've helped create more than 250 software startups, and so that's big news for the city of Phoenix. It was a great time, great celebration, and Zach Ferris, the CEO, a young man who's done very well, created a lot of jobs, continues to do so, had a special announcement that there will be a merger, so they are going to be joining the Insight co-founders, the brothers Eric and Tim Crown. In fact, Tim was there and spoke and talked about the merger, and it was just it was exciting news, and again, just continues to help move Phoenix forward in this wave of becoming the place to be if you have a startup, specifically a tech startup. So really exciting news and very excited to be part of that. I know we're going to hear a little bit about the legislature later in this meeting, and sometimes, regardless of what comes out of the legislature, it causes people to wonder and figure out what some of our legislators may be thinking or why they're investing certain time in certain areas, regardless of the side of the aisle that people may be supporting. That said, the legislature did something very, very good that I think everyone at the legislature supported, which is the Opiate Epidemic Act. It was unanimously supported, and if I could just speak for a moment as a first responder, we're just taking off the policymaker hat. We see up close every first responder here. We have some police officers here in the back as well. See up close and personal, literally every shift, the negative impacts of this epidemic. It takes people's lives, it destroys families, it breaks hearts and minds of people of every race, color, creed, socioeconomic background, gender, preference, nationality, certainly regardless of anyone's political affiliation. So it was fitting that this was done unanimously, and so I want to credit the governor and the legislature for coming together for this bill. But I also just want to remind people and our legislature that obviously this is a start. It's a good start, but there's a lot of work that has to be done, and I want to thank some of our clergy locally in District 5, 19 along 19 North, 19th Avenue, and Butler. Open Door Fellowship, they are hosting an opiate epidemic forum, and some of the conversation will be on prevention and what to do if one of your loved ones or a friend, or if you are in this situation. They're big on no stigma and no judging, and so it's just a matter of really taking on this important issue, just taking it head on and trying to deal with it. So I want to thank our neighbors there in District 5 for pushing that forward. I also would like to just say that it's not too late, finally, it's not too late to sign up, switching gears here, for the Youth Startup Weekend held by the Cahoots Foundation every year. This year it'll be held on February 9th through the 11th. You can visit the website, cahoots.com/youth-startup-weekend. That's cahoots.com/youth-startup-weekend to learn more about it. But these are a lot of students that are coming in from around the state, not just the Valley, but the state, that will come in and work with mentors, entrepreneurs who are doing very well, and so they're going to work with mentors all weekend long. They're going to be combined in teams with other students that they have never met before, and they're working on communication skills, teamwork skills, many of them working on their coding skills, their presentation skills. All of them are working on their problem-solving skills. And it's really interesting. It's very cool to see what they come up with by the end of the weekend. So check that out. It's always fun to be part of that as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councilman. Anyone else? All right, I'm just going to add, I think some of the council members spoke very beautifully about Bishop Alexis Thomas and the impact he had on our community. I do want to offer my deepest sympathies and condolences to Dr. Michelle Thomas and the family, and really say, Ed, that the team at the Convention Center did a really wonderful job. Bishop passed away, and there was just a little over a week to plan a extremely large homegoing service. 6,000 people attended. You know, our team started planning that about a week in advance, and to do as well as they did under such difficult and short time period, I thought was a wonderful and beautiful thing, and a gift to the entire community. So a debt of gratitude to John Chan and the whole team over at the Convention Center for working so closely with the professionals at Pilgrim's Rest Church and putting on a wonderful homegoing ceremony of the size and magnitude that we'll probably never see again in our lifetimes, and do it in such a short period. So we owe them a huge debt of gratitude. Okay. With that, we'll move on to additional items on our agenda. There's no consent action. Is there a call for an executive session? It's okay.
Mayor, in accordance with properly posted notice and agenda, I move that the City Council, pursuant to Arizona Revised Statutes, Section 38-431.02.a, meet in executive session on Tuesday, February 13, 2018, at 12 p.m. in the East Conference Room, 12th floor of the Phoenix City Hall, 200 West Washington Street, Phoenix, Arizona. We have no zip code. There, that's my motion.
There's a motion and without the zip code, are we still legal? We're good, all right, good.
Okay, just
There's a
checking.
motion, and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That passes unanimously. Next, we'll have any report or updates by the city manager. Ms. Zucker, do we have any reports or updates?
Mayor, we'll be ready to go right into the budget item on the agenda.
All right. Next item on the agenda is item number 1. Item number 1 is a 2018-19 early general fund budget status report. So our city manager is going to give us budget status as it concerns potential next year's budget that we'll be working on over the next few months, and then I think a 5-year outlook, and then a discussion of pension issues, and it relates to the time period for repayment of debt under the pension. So with that, I'll hand it over to our city manager for item number 1.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Today, we are kicking off the budget season with an early status report from the Budget and Research Director and Chief Financial Officer. This is part of the ongoing budget development effort and transparency you have tasked staff with. I do want to recognize our Budget and Research staff. 4 of them are here today. Rick, Tracy, Amber, and Chris, our deputy directors, who are also really working diligently on this, as well as all the staff in finance and throughout the city. So as we begin, it's important to discuss the role each part of the process plays. The budget is an immediate plan for how we will spend resources in a 1-year time frame to serve the public and meet our annual obligations. As the mayor mentioned, in a month, we will talk about a 5-year forecast. That forecast is a best practice that we do each year. That gives a longer time horizon to prepare for positive results based on information we have at the time. As you will see, the work we've all done since last February together, last February's 5-year forecast, has paid positive dividends. Finally, farther out on the horizon are our long-term obligations. The one we've been discussing the most together is our pension liability, and as the mayor mentioned, we're going to discuss that in more detail in 2 weeks when we have some conversation about following up on the meeting we had in December. Annual required pension contributions, which are often called the ARC, those impact our yearly budget, but we also take a view over the 25-plus year life of a liability. So pensions are like, in this way, are like a home mortgage. The debt is not immediately due, but you need to plan for it over its lifespan. And that can be 25-plus years. The council has been diligent in reforming the city's pension system, saving $1 billion over the next 25 years. And just last month, we had a study session about options to continue working on that liability over this longer time horizon, which, as I mentioned, we'll discuss in a couple weeks. But for today, our message is that your preparation has paid off in positive results for next year's budget. And so I'll now turn it over to our Budget and Research Director, Jeff Barton. We also have our Chief Financial Officer, Denise Olson. But Jeff will now explain the early general fund budget status.
Good afternoon, Mayor, members of the council. As the city manager mentioned, today's presentation is really a high-level overview. We will get into a much more granular budget presentation next month as we go through the 5-year forecast and general fund status. Today's process is really just to orient you and let you know kind of where we are. And as Ed mentioned also, this is the first step in our multi-series part of adopting our balanced budget. So I'm sure I'll wear out my welcome in the next 6 months as I sit at this table with you almost every month. So again, I want to remind everyone in the audience and those watching from home, you all know this, by state statute and city charter, we are required to adopt a balanced budget. That means that our annual resources and our annual expenditures must be equal to one another, and that's what this open, transparent, and collaborative process has always been about and continues to be about for the city of Phoenix. So what I want to do now is take you back in time as we start this presentation. I want to take you back 11 months ago to the February 2017 5-year forecast. If you remember at that point in time, we were about 6 months into fiscal year 16-17, so utilizing the data that we had at that point in time, we were projecting that fiscal year 18-19, in the absence of doing anything corrective, that we could see a potential shortfall of between $43 and $64 million. And again, that was 11 months ago, and when has the city of Phoenix just done nothing? That is not our way, that is not what we do. So over that time, we've continued to monitor and update our revenue information. We've also continued to aggressively pursue our tight spending control process that we go through. And as a result of those items, and as well as your direct guidance and leadership, we've taken swift and prompt corrective action to alleviate that deficit, and that's what we want to talk to you about today. So taking a few moments to walk you through that. So again, reminding you of the fact that the 5-year forecast by itself is a static document. It's something that's prepared in a particular point in time, utilizing a particular set of data. That point in time for us last year was February, so 6 months into fiscal year 16-17. We had another 6 months to go in that fiscal year. At the time, we forecasted or projected that our ending balance for 16-17, which is also our beginning balance for the current fiscal year, was going to be about $119 million. We continued to work throughout 7+5, which starts for us in February, throughout the rest of the budget year for fiscal year 16-17, and by the time you adopted the actual 17-18 budget, we had already increased that beginning balance to $130 million. That was largely based on what we saw at the time for 16-17 was increased revenues of about $1.8 million, and as well as reduced expenditures by about $8.7 million. Then we came back to you in September, and we talked to you about how we actually ended the fiscal year, and we brought in another $14 million by additional reduced spending. So those two items combined increased our fund balance from $119 million to $144 million, comparing the forecast to where we actually were at the beginning of this fiscal year. Also in September, as we were talking to you at length about the year-end status, we also brought forward to you a series of early efficiency actions. So these were items that we brought forward. We asked all departments to identify 1.5% of their budget that wouldn't impact nor impair services to the community. As a result of that, we found $6 million worth of items that were going forward would save us $6 million a year. However, a handful of those items availed themselves to an early elimination, saving us an additional $4 million in the current fiscal year. Immediately after that, we begin what BNR affectionately calls our 3+9 technical review process in October. So following that, we start that process, and that's the process where I've explained to you before. We go through the arduous task, line by line, cost center by cost center, analyzing revenues and expenditures. Based on the data that we're looking at currently, and again, we'll bring a lot more information back to you next month, but based on what we're seeing now, net resources in the current fiscal year, we think we can increase those by about $9 million. That's largely driven by a slight increase in our relative population share, so we're taking in a little more state shared revenue, but it's also a lot to do with VLT. Vehicle license sales tax are actually up. And I know anecdotally from a position that I hold on the board of Arizona Federal Credit Union that people are replacing cars finally. So you see the recession, people held on to cars for 10, 12, 13 years. Now with the cost of funds being low and low interest rates, people are actually starting to replace cars, and we're starting to see that impact the economy. Also, and as we're reviewing revenues, we're also reviewing those expenditures. And so what we've done through that analysis, looking at vacancies, looking at everything from fuel to commodities to contractuals, we actually were also able to reduce our expenditures by about $10 million. As well as looking at those things just for the current year and relative to last year's forecast, we also see that based on that continued increase in state shared revenue and VLT taxes collections, that we also are looking to increase next year's resources by about $8 million as compared to last year's forecast. So when you add it all up, these items total $56 million. So again, when we compare that $56 million to the forecast that we initially compared, that $43 to $64 million, this puts us almost dead center, so right at the midpoint of that range. And so based on that information and based on all the other things that we're currently looking at and still evaluating, we are extremely confident that we can balance fiscal year 18-19 without increasing revenues and without impairing or impacting negatively our services to the community. However, with that being said, there are a few things that I think we should spend a few moments talking to you about today, and these will be recurring themes that you hear us talk about with you at length over the next couple of months as we go through this budget development process. The first item is just our general fund revenue outlook. Year-to-date revenue growth is actually very strong. Currently, at 5 months, we're getting ready to release the 5-month revenue report. We're at about 4.1% growth over prior year at the same time frame. So it's really strong growth. We are in line with our budget. You remember in years past, first couple of months have been a little rocky, and we've had to make negative adjustments to revenue. That doesn't look like it's the case this year. But I do want to caution everyone, we still do not yet have our holiday sales tax collections. And for us, that's a really key ingredient until we can really set our revenue estimates. We like to have those in hand because it tells us a lot about the health of the economy as we look ahead. So we're reserving a little bit of judgment for that, but other than that, we think revenue looks pretty good. One area that we'd also like to spend some time and pay attention on is our allocation of state shared revenue. Everyone knows that state shared revenue is allocated by relative population share. And over the last couple of years, the City of Phoenix relative population share has been a little bit volatile. So I want to walk you through what that looks like. So back in 2000, City of Phoenix relative population share was about 32.7%. Following the 2010 census, that number dropped to 28.8%. Last fiscal year, we were at about 28.9%, so it held flat. This fiscal year, part of the reason why we're seeing a little bit of an increase in state shared revenue is that number went up by a couple basis points to 29.4, as you can see there. This is important, especially now, looking ahead to the 2020 census. We know that the census is upon us, and it's imperative that the City of Phoenix takes an active role at explaining that to our residents, encouraging our residents to take an active role in that census to make sure that we are effectively counted and accurately counted. If we don't do that, then it's possible that our relative population share would decrease, thereby decreasing our relative population share and our state shared revenues. The next item, and again, we started talking to you about this many years ago when you actively engaged in pension reform, but over the last couple of months, we've talked about it at even more detail. We will be discussing with you during the 5-year forecast pension at a much more granular level. But for today's purposes, what I want to share with you is, based on what we're looking at now, total COPERS costs, while they are increasing, they're currently looking and projecting less than what we projected in last year's 5-year forecast. And we'll talk about that a little bit as we go through the 5-year forecast next month. But that has a lot to do with the reform measures that you put in place, as well as the strong performance that the plan had last fiscal year. As we talk about PSPRS, it too, right now, based on the forecast that we're looking at now, assuming a 25-year amortization, those costs are also projecting less than what was projected in last year's forecast, which was a 20-year amortization. Any change to the amortization schedule, that would have an impact on the budget. And again, we'll talk about those projections as we talk about this next month. The final item that I want to spend a little bit of time talking to you about today, but we'll talk to you more about that on February 13th, and then throughout the budget development process, is our infrastructure and capital investments. The City of Phoenix, in providing the services that we provide to our residents, we operate over 600 facilities. As those facilities age, much like our house and our cars, they require additional maintenance. To ensure that those facilities are operating at peak performance and peak levels, over the next few years, we will require additional investments into those facilities, and that's something that will reflect in the 5-year forecast, and we'll also talk to you about that in that presentation. Technology is in the same vein as our facilities. A lot of the services that we provide rely on technology. As that technology ages, it needs to be upgraded, it needs to be replaced, it requires patches. So to ensure that that technology is operating and that we can provide continuity of operations across the entire organization, we will also show additional resources going towards technology in the future. And finally, our vehicle fleet. We've got an extensive fleet of vehicles, thousands and thousands of vehicles out there serving our residents. I know anecdotally, our light-duty vehicles, on average, they're about 9 years old, and they have about 80,000 miles on them. Those vehicles are getting a little long in the tooth, and they also require additional maintenance, and they're also going to require additional funding for replacement at a higher level than what we've been doing over the past few years. This is even of more importance when you look at the patrol cars and the fire apparatus. So we will be discussing that with you as well. And then finally, this is just a look at the next steps, our budget calendar. Again, I told you I'll be back every month. I'm sure I'll wear out my welcome really, really soon. But this is the early status, the first step. Next month, we come back with a capital projects review, as well as our 5-year forecast. Then in March, the trial budget, we'll be presenting that to you, then taking that out to the community in April, coming back in May for the council budget decision, and that will be followed up with our formal adoption of the budget ordinances in June and July. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
All right, thank you very much. So we're not voting on this today. This is obviously the first start in a much larger budget process. Are there any cards from individuals in the public wishing to speak? I don't have any cards with me. Okay, now I'll turn to members of the council to see if they have any questions for either our budget director, Jeff Barton, our chief financial officer, Ms. Olson, or our city manager, Mr. Zerker. Council CCO, please.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, surprising, isn't it, that I would ask a fiscal issue? Couple things. One, how much did the city of Phoenix add to the police and fire pension debt last year? What was the total amount that was added to that debt?
It's a note. So, Councilman, if you look at the report, it's in your report. It shows that the net pension unfunded liability for PSPRS increased from $2.1 million to $2.687 million.
Billion. With the
Billion, I'm sorry, billion.
Billion. So you said it's only 500 million, you said, that vote that we increased by going to 30 years?
No, what I'm saying is that the change in the pension plan itself, based on performance and all of the other funding that's in that plan, that's what is owed. So that's the change in what was owed.
So let's go back to, maybe I need to rephrase the question. I thought I was clear, but maybe I'm not. When the city of Phoenix added the years to the pension debt, from 20 years to 30 years, how much was that debt increase? How much did they add to that? Additional debt.
So, Mayor, City Council, since last year, we have received new actuarial studies from PSPRS, and so we need to come back later with those additional numbers. But we have not yet received direction from the council on how many years we actually need to pay. We just elected to have an option to pay up to 30 years. But right now, we're looking at 25 years is what our recommendation is, but that has not yet been approved.
Let me rephrase it again. I'm sorry. Maybe I'm just not clear. When the city of Phoenix voted to give the option to go up to 10 years additional in the debt, how much was the council and the public told at the time that it was going to raise the amount of debt? By about how much more? In addition,
Extending the life of it.
Yes, I don't remember off the top of my head, but what I would like to do is come back with the most up-to-date numbers based on the new actuarial studies at the February 13th meeting.
So you don't know that number? How could you not know that? I mean, you guys are supposed to be in finance. I'm sorry to be rude, but you're not being upfront with the public again. So let me ask this again. When the city council voted to increase the debt on the police and fire pensions and add another 10 years to it, and I keep rephrasing this, I think everybody knows what I'm asking for, how much more debt was added to the city of Phoenix pensions for police and fire? Additional.
I think the answer is we don't have those numbers right here with us right now. The report.
But how much was it that was told to the public? Was it 2.1 billion more or
I don't know
2.3 billion
I don't
more?
remember that.
I do. It was
Okay.
over 2 billion. So let's just assume it was over $2 billion that was added. I mean, I don't know how you guys don't know that, but you should know those things if you're going to make a presentation like this. Sorry, because when you have to be direct, you have to tell the public the truth, and you know the information. For you to sit here and tell me that you don't have basic information of what the council voted for and what it added for that extra 10 years is a real problem. So I'll get into that. So the city of Phoenix now is talking about how being fiscally responsible and how great this was, when in fact that the public needs to understand what they did was add years to the debt service, and by doing that, they added over $2 billion more in debt that now says, oh, we have a balanced budget. If households and people in the private sector that ran their homes, moms, single moms, had to go out and continually raise their debt, they would be underwater overnight. So what I'm trying to get at right here is that what is it that the city of Phoenix raised their debt to by going to the 10-year option? We'll get it in a couple weeks. We should have that at our fingertips today, but we don't, because that is what contributed to this. So what's going to end up happening, and I won't get into a lot of it because I promised Laura Pastor I wasn't going to get into a lot until I don't get my questions answered. And I think that's just a real problem.
Thank you.
And I'm going to tell you, staff has to be able to be either A, prepared for these kind of meetings and be prepared for these kinds of questions, or at least be upfront and tell the public exactly the truth. So there's two things that need to occur. If we were to go to a true interest rate, which right now we're based, I think, at 7.4% as a return, I'd like to have staff come back and tell us what that interest rate would be on a 10-year average. Two, I'd like to look at real true mortality rates as well. Right now, I believe it's 69 years. Is that correct in the pensions?
I'm not sure what the actual mortality rate is. I think it's different for different employees.
Well, we should find that out then. And again, those are things that we should know, but come back with a real mortality rate that most people are using, not governments, but real, people in the private sector, which they did get rid of pensions, but look at 78 years, 77 years even. The other is, it's nice to come up with a rosy, pat yourself on the back plan and say, hey, we did all these great things, when in fact all the city of Phoenix did was increase their debt. And increasing the debt, they were able to have more money today. But instead it added over $2 billion to our pension deficit. So now I want to explain as well, because we've got police officers in here. What the Phoenix City Council did, provided by staff, was a staff-driven proposal to those of you that are here today. Your pension plans are already destabilized. They're already destabilized. And by adding debt to the police and fire, the ones that protect us on a daily basis, the city of Phoenix has worked and did everything that it could to destabilize your pensions even more. And it makes it even harder. So for those of you that are probably 15 years, 10, 12 years away from retiring, you're going to be looking at a pension problem, and a major problem. You're already paying about 37% is fully funded, and then the rest of it's unfunded. It is only going to get worse by adding more years to it. Second, and I'll finish with this, this is the first step of what happens to cities that are in decline, and they're having problems. You see streets crumbling, autos needing repair, buildings needing repair work. All these things end up becoming a longer-term problem if they're not dealt with today. These pension problems have to be dealt with today, not in the future. Every 24 hours adds more debt, more problems to the city of Phoenix, and long-term problems to our children and their families. So if you don't deal with this today, it only gets better. It gets exacerbated, and it becomes even worse. These are all masking of the problems, masking of the solutions. And one of the reasons that we're doing well in the city is because we have growth. If you didn't have growth, you would have a real significant problem. And you're going to see less and less money for programs, less, I see Craig Tripkin over there, less and less monies for homeless, because this is what cities do over time. Then it comes down just to paying off the debt. And you can't do that. You cannot survive. It will not work. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you very much, Councilman DeCiccio. I wanted the city manager opportunity to speak. Obviously, when the state legislature did pass, I think unanimously, the legislation allowing cities across the state of Arizona, I think it was requested by public safety organizations asking that there be a longer actuarial repayment period. At your recommendation, this council did vote to accept that, but to utilize a 25-year actuarial period. My understanding is that you made that recommendation because you thought that was the best way to protect programs and services that the city provides while providing the best opportunity to pay down the unfunded liability. But I'll let you speak to why you made that recommendation to this council.
Mayor, that's correct. As I showed in the first slide, there's a balance between providing services to the public in a one-year view of the budget and dealing with the 25-year horizon. And so our recommendation about availing ourselves of the state passed option was in order to give ourselves room in our budget to be able to continue providing services, continue hiring police officers and firefighters, and doing all the other things people expect, and meet our pension obligations, which we will do based on actuaries. I do have to go back and say that I totally reject any implication that these two staff members have ever done anything except tell the truth to the council.
Well, then why aren't
We
they
have
telling us
told
the
the
truth
truth.
right now, Ed?
We're telling
the
the
fact
truth.
of the matter is,
Councilman
the
Manager,
implication
before-
is they're not being truthful to the
Councilman
public
DeCiccio,
because
the
they
city
know the
manager
number and they're not telling us what
has
it
the
is.
floor, and then you'll have the opportunity
They
to
know the
respond.
number, and they're not
Councilman,
telling us.
Councilman,
So
you
is that
asked-
being truthful, Ed?
You asked a specific question about a number which we don't have immediately at our fingertips.
But your
That
staff
is
should
different
know
than
these
not telling
numbers.
the truth. We said we're prepared to have a pension discussion in 2 weeks. We can probably walk out of here and get that number
But
to
how
you
do you
within an
not
hour.
come prepared to
I
a
don't
meeting
have
like
every
this
number.
where you're
If
talking
you could always
finances,
ask
Ed?
us in advance
You're
of the
not being
meeting, and we could
truthful.
bring them.
You're
we could
not.
bring the
They
numbers.
know what the number is, and they're refusing to
Well,
give that number out because it would
to
embarrass
say that we're not
them. It
truthful
would embarrass
is-
the
I
city
completely
for
reject
making a
that
bad
idea.
move. So the fact of the matter is they're either not prepared or they're not being truthful. Which is it?
Okay, so Mr. City Manager, I want you to have an opportunity to finish the question that was asked. Go ahead.
As I said, we can provide answers to questions, particularly when we have specific detailed questions in advance. We're always happy to have those numbers, and we will get those for you. Asked out of the blue, we don't have those with us.
Councilman, I
We are
really would like
talking
to
about the
hear the
budget
man's
today.
response.
So again, on February 13th, we're coming to talk about the budget, about pensions and that longer-term horizon. Today, we're talking about the work and how it's resulted in bringing us to a place with our one-year budget where we are in balance, and then we can begin having the dialogue about next year's budget. We will get those numbers, as you asked. That is a different issue than saying that people aren't being truthful.
All right, so let's see, other council members have any questions for our professional staff that's here? Councilwoman Gallego, please.
As you do produce those numbers, I think one of the things that's important is that a majority of this city council has said, although we have voted to allow a 30-year amortization period, we don't want to do that. We want to pay back, we want to pay down that debt at a more aggressive schedule. I think it might even been everyone on this council said we don't want a 30-year amortization period. So putting out numbers with a 30-year amortization period is not accurate. It's not what we expect or what we predict. And so we need to put out responsible numbers about what we expect to actually happen so that we can make good budget decisions. And we went into great detail at the last meeting for the audit committee about these numbers, about the tables and whether we were following best practices. You mentioned that we're going to be updating mortality tables, following best practice, but also new research. So I think it's important, and we talked with our auditors about what we should be doing and what were responsible decisions. And that's something you've committed that we're going to continue to do as we have been. So I think that's important to mention. In general, I want to say thank you to our city employees for stepping up. We're in a much stronger budget position because people tried very hard to be fiscally responsible, and that's a team effort. We as the city council ought to recognize that and say thank you to the people who thought creatively about how we can deliver great services to our residents while remembering that we need to cut costs where possible and be responsible. So please give the managers who came up with these ideas our thanks for their leadership. Also appreciated the comments about investing in technology as a budget priority for this year. That's certainly a priority for me, particularly as we look at some of our larger departments like the police department. I've been learning that many other cities actually have a chief technology officer in the department who can understand some of the unique constraints faced by departments like the police department with areas like security and the sensitive data that they have, but maybe putting civilians at a high level who can help us manage those costs and understand the innovation in that area. When we have difficult and incredibly expensive projects like the record management system, sometimes I think spending a little bit of money to have a high-level expert in the department can really pay dividends and help us manage those pretty significant costs on the technology side. So that's something I hope we will look to as we develop the budget this year. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councilman Waring?
Thank you. First, I want to say thanks. I mentioned this before. More accurate projections, I think, are helping us balance the budget. So that was a good change that some of us had requested, and that really helps. I guess if I was going to summarize this for someone who's at home, we had fears, over the past year that this year have to raise taxes or something to balance the budget. It sounds like if the projections continue for the rest of the year and the carry forward's the same and so forth, so you'd be thinking that's not necessary for this year, and we can cobble together a balanced budget out of existing resources for at least one more year. Is that a fair statement for those watching at home if I wanted to summarize your presentation in one or two sentences?
That is correct, Councilman.
Okay. I mean, that's good news. That's, you did good work to get there. I do think borrowing money on the pension and everything, I think that was misguided. But regardless, at least for this year, things are going better. I would remind people, though, at home, Councilman DeCiccio mentioned it, you could have a downturn any day. Stock market was way down today and yesterday. Does that mean anything? Not necessarily. In isolation, not necessarily. But, at some point, we're not going to be the fastest growing city and the fastest growing county in the country. And next year, we have labor contracts. Would have been this year, but it's next year. So that'll present challenges because people are going to expect raises. It's been a good economy throughout the 3 years. Well, so far, for the first year and a half anyway of that period. We're going to definitely have challenges at some point. This document would potentially get us through this year. But going forward, what's the plan going into next year? Assuming that this all holds, we're going to have new council members, most likely. How are we going to put something together for next year that's still balanced, because we're still going to have the pension issues. Some things have been better this year than you anticipated. Next year, they could be worse. There's no really to know. That's why they're called estimates. Any thoughts on that?
All right, so for 18-19, the recommendation is going to be no revenue increases and no service cuts. The question from the council member is, as we start looking at 19-20, what preparation are we doing to best enable us to be in the same position the year thereafter?
Well, and that's what we talked about early in the presentation. So at the end of February, we will be coming back to you again with our official 5-year forecast. And the plan at that point, again, what we're looking at now, we are looking at the softness that you mentioned that could happen at some point in the future. At the end of fiscal year 18-19, we will have entered the longest economic expansion post-recession in the history of the United States. So that is something to consider. We're looking at how long VLT will continue to grow, how long state share will continue to grow. We're also going to be bringing back for you these different models of what the 25-year pension amortization looks like, as well as what our other projections are on our expenditures. So we'll be coming back to you with a very detailed 5-year forecast, and we'll talk to you about every little assumption that we're making in that forecast.
I know you can't do it, Mayor, sorry. I know you can't do anything about, you don't know what the labor contracts will necessarily look like. That's all based on status quo. I'm guessing people are going to want raises. That's just my hunch, but based on history perhaps. But we'll see. I guess it'll probably possibly depend on where the economy's at. long-term, I just don't know if this path we're on is sustainable, but I will applaud you for if you can get through another year without really a need for a large revenue increase. I just fear that day's coming, but if you can get through it another year, that's a good thing. But I just always keep looking at the long-term if you could. I know that's what the 5-year forecast is, but those obviously vary widely the farther out you get. So, but I thank you for your work here, and I guess we'll see you in a couple weeks.
Thank you very much, Councilman. Other comments? Vice Mayor?
I'm going to go back to a conversation or dialogue that we've been having. So I guess my question is, how much of the $56 million in savings that you were able to identify are directly related to the extension of debt to the pension fund that Councilman DeCiccio is speaking about?
Vice Mayor Pastor, so we will be bringing that definitively back to you next month, but what I can tell you today, based on the analysis, and we're still going through that analysis, is for fiscal year 18-19, we will, by going to a 25-year amortization versus a 20, we save between $12 and $15 million on a going forward basis. In the current fiscal year, what we plan to do is take that there's $25 million in savings in the current fiscal year. That money will go into the pension reserve or pension stabilization fund as we discussed. And the plan would be going forward that money would be then help us to alleviate any future PSPRS pension increases going forward.
Okay. So this is how these figures are now being related. Can you just repeat that one more time so it's on the record?
Sure. So
Sure.
as of today, and again, we'll bring more definitive information back next month, a 25-year amortization for fiscal year 18-19 is going to save us between $12 to $15 million compared to what we're estimating. In the current, or 18-19, I'm sorry. And then in the current fiscal year, our pension estimates are going to save us $25 million in the current fiscal year. That money goes into a pension reserve fund. That pension reserve fund exists for the sole purpose of helping us alleviate future pension increases in PSPRS.
And if we hadn't voted on or discussed extending to 25 years, what would have happened? Or where would we be at this moment?
If we kept a 20-year amortization, you lose the pension stabilization fund in the current fiscal year, so you do not have that 25-year pension stabilization fund. Your pension costs next year would increase relative to last year's forecast. They would be $12 million higher or $15 million higher than what we're currently projecting.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Any other comments or questions by members of this council? Okay, I want to thank you for this report. Obviously, there's, I guess, no citizen comments at this time. I'm sure there will be a lot of citizen comments as we go through the public budgeting process. But I just want to say thank you, Ed, to you and to Jeff Barton and to Denise Olson. We have asked to do early planning, both 5-year forecast, but then early each fiscal year to identify savings so that we have the best chance to have a balanced budget with no service cuts every single year. A few years ago, as Councilman Waring pointed out, the longer projections indicated that this year was going to be a more difficult budget year. I think the work that you have done to prepare for that, to identify early savings and to implement that is one of the major reasons why in this upcoming budget year, assuming this council doesn't make any significant changes, we're going to have no revenue increases and 0 service cuts to the public for those incredibly important programs that the public relies on and believes in, as does the majority of this council. So I just want to publicly say we look forward to the more detailed 5-year forecast in a few weeks, a more detailed discussion of longer-term pension liability. But really, I want to thank you for your incredible high level of professionalism that has helped lead us to this point. Mr. City Manager, these are 2 of the best city employees that we have standing before us. I've been around a long time, serving on council and as mayor. And in terms of our CFO and Budget and Research Director positions, these are 2 of the very best. And I just want to publicly say thank you for what you've done to help lead us to this position. Any other comments? Councilman Waring, please.
Do you mind? I'm sorry. I know you were trying to wrap up. So something was said, if you don't have it right now, I think I know the answer. So the increase in pension costs you mentioned, I think you said $12 to $15 million if we hadn't moved from the 20 to the 25. We're still going to have to pay. It's not like we're cutting out some expenses. We're pushing off when we're paying that 12 to 15. correct. I just want people at home, sorry, Mayor, when you were talking, it just occurred to me, that's probably unclear to people at home. We're not really saving the 12 to 15. Eventually, taxpayers are going to have to pay it, plus extra costs. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, Mr.
I mean,
Ed-
you're nodding, but if
You
you.
analogize it to a mortgage that you might someday take at home.
Yeah, I mean.
Mayor, Councilman Waring, the best analogy is the difference in a 15 and a 30-year
Yeah.
mortgage, which people are familiar with. You pay more every year for a shorter period of time, or you fit it into your budget at less per year over a longer period of time. You pay more over 30 years than over 15, but it's all about managing what you can fit into what you can afford on a yearly basis. And that's really the balance that the council and we're trying to strike here as we go through.
And my concern, because I understand why in the short term this makes sense, I guess to Councilman DeCicio's point, the figure I remember was 2.3 billion. So those are the extra costs over a really extended period of time, but at some point, some future, our successors, a couple decades from now, are going to have to pay those extra costs because of what we're doing here to save the 12 or 15 million for right now. Is that a fair analysis of kind of all we heard about the pension stuff?
Yes.
Okay. So just so people are clear at home, we are going to have extra interest costs, however you want to phrase it using your mortgage analogy, in the distant future, and that is going to impact services in the distant future. I'm 50, so I'd be like 70. I would like to think I'll still be here. My kids hopefully will definitely choose to live in Phoenix. I love Phoenix, and they're going to wind up paying that. So it's just something to consider going forward. Thank you.
Vice Mayor.
I have one more question. Jeff, you had mentioned the census and that it was important. Could you explain why it's so important and what is it that we are going to need for the census?
Well, I'll let the city manager talk about what we may need for the census, but as that slide that I showed you, every time we have a census count, what has happened to Phoenix, our relative population share has decreased at a rate, and our surrounding cities have actually grown. So as our relative population share adjusts up or down, it has a direct impact or correlation on our state shared revenue collections. So the bigger percentage we are, we get a higher percentage of state share revenue. If that number decreases, we get less state shared revenue. So it's imperative that the city takes a role, and I know in the past we've done advertisements, we've done staffing, we've done all kinds of things to encourage residents to participate and show full participation.
And Vice Mayor, in terms of the census, what we've had success with in the past, and I think given what we know about the census and we'll hear from our team next, is to have a team focused on that issue. It's a community organization to make sure that everybody is counted, because everybody being counted, as the budget director has said, results in more state shared revenue and federal revenue. So we need key staff to be focused on it, resources to support citizens groups that come together to work on it as we go over the next 2 years. So that's what we would anticipate.
So then will there be dollars identified to this, or am I hearing, I can interpret it two different ways. The first way I could say there will be dollars dedicated towards the census. The second way I can interpret it is we will provide internal manpower to be able, and a community group to be able to build, I'm going to use the term strategic plan, but a plan around the census in order to make sure that everybody gets counted. So,
Vice Mayor, you've
is it
actually hit
both?
on both of those things
Okay.
are correct, that there's internal resources we need to put to it, but there also in the past has been an external fundraising part where we've had some private sector money that's helped us to fund the outreach efforts in the community, as well as using just the in-kind resources from the community, but also there will be perhaps some fundraising that we need to do.
okay, thank you.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Councilwoman Stark?
Thank you, Mayor. Just going back to the discussion that you brought up, Councilman Waring, part of going from the 20 to 25 year, my understanding was that we're still going to try to set aside money whenever possible and pay the debt down. Just like you can on a mortgage, you can take out a 30-year mortgage, but you can pay it off early if you can. So we're still committed to that, correct?
That's correct. So as we go through the fiscal year, and it could be even at year end like last year when we had the $14 million, what we could bring back to you at that point in time is taking that $14 million and sending it forward to PSPRS to pay it down, and
So-
as well as the stabilization fund.
Thank you. So, to the councilman's point, we are going to end up paying more, but we need to be aggressive in trying to pay it off and pay it down as quickly as possible, correct? Okay.
Councilman Gallego.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you for having these regular presentations, and the council really challenged, particularly the budget department, to say, we want data regularly. We get regular emails throughout the month about projections and budget information, and we challenged and said, could you have a more transparent process? And I want to thank Jeff for stepping up and making that happen. We really do appreciate. We have a very wonky council, and you get us the data we need, and Denise as well has been wonderful about going through our CAFR page by page if needed to make sure that we understand the financials and can make the best possible decisions for the city. So we are very lucky to have you both. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Any additional final comments on this item? All right, thank you very much for the great work, and we look forward to seeing you a lot in the next few weeks and months. Thank you so much. Next item on our agenda will be a voting item of this council. It is the 2018 legislative update, and it will include a more detailed discussion, I think, of our early census efforts, which is so critically important to this city to make sure that we get our fair share of federal resources, and to the state of Arizona to make sure we get all our people counted. So we get at least one more congressional district after the next census for the entire state of Arizona, which is another important issue as well. All right, so with that, I'll hand it over to Mr. Manager, and you decide how you move forward. We got our entire legislative team here, and then we'll determine how to go about taking votes on these important items.
Karen Peters.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. Yes, as we said in December when we were before you with the state and federal legislative agendas, we would come back periodically to give you updates, and that's what we're here to do today. We have an update on our state legislative status and some items there, as well as an update on our federal legislative agenda that we'd like to put forward for your consideration. With that, I will introduce our Government Relations Director, Frank McCune, to kick it off.
Thank you for, Mayor and Council, thank you for allowing us to present today on the state and federal issues. We have a brief presentation we'll run through. It's a snapshot of bills to date that we've taken action on and that are in your packet from Friday, and run through just a couple of informational items and take action on bill that we're looking for guidance on at the state legislature. So today's the 23rd day of the second regular session of the 53rd legislature. To date, 1,113 bills have been introduced, and staff continues to review each of these items to identify potential impacts to the city. For everyone in the city who are reviewing the bills, we appreciate it a lot. We know that it's a heavy load, especially as the deadlines are coming up on bill filings. So people are reviewing a lot of bills for us, and we appreciate it. The Governor's State of the State address was presented on January 8th, and just to tell you on a couple of areas the Governor focused on. He focused on K through 12 education and funding, and the funding received a great piece of emphasis for the speech. While he announced that spending is up 10% since 2015 in schools, there was still work to be done on items such as all-day kindergarten, internet in rural areas, and career and technical education. The opioid crisis also was key in his speech, and he called for a special session to work on the problem, which opened and closed last week. Some results of that legislation was enacting standards to limit the dispensing of controlled substances, enacting Good Samaritan protections, and the establishment of enforcement procedures for violations, including overprescribing and illegal dispensing. The governor also is looking to make it a felony if you're under the influence and being a wrong-way driver through the exits. Lastly, the governor released a $10.1 billion budget package that included, for some of our interest, additional money for Department of Revenue auditors And of particular note, we had worked all fall to get additional money for police officer training. And in the governor's budget, they put in $800,000 for police officer training, which was a great item for us. Since this is our first policy presentation this year since the session started, just wanted to remind everyone about our own process internally. Each of those 1,000 bills that I talked about has their introduced. John Wayne reviews them. The bills get sent out, if they relate to us, to the city in any way, to the departments for review and impact analysis. We also meet with city attorneys from the departments to review the impacts, both negative and positive, and based upon whether the bill falls within the state guiding principles, we take a position and start working the bill. The 4 items, as a reminder, for the state guiding principles, which we voted on in the fall as a council, that you voted on as a council, were opposing unfunded mandates, preserving local control, protecting shared revenues, and protecting water resources. So to date, John Wayne now will review, will answer questions on bills that we've taken positions on.
Thank you. Mayor and Council. Mayor and Council, there you go. So in the packet that you received on the state legislative update, you have a number of bills that we have listed, given what Mr. McCune said about bills that negatively impact the city's core values. And in your packet, they are bills A through H. And given that they fall under the core principles, we're here to answer any questions you may have if you want to discuss any one particular bill from A through H.
Councilman Williams, please.
You put out a blast to all of us to notify all our constituents that this had been introduced. Were the results?
There are 2 bills that are, actually one of them was heard yesterday, another one's scheduled for this afternoon, Mayor and Council. And the first bill was 1002, and the second bill was House Bill 2333. Those 2 bills attempt to have the state have some oversight and preempt local governments from trying to have some type of ordinances that try to manage home-based businesses in neighborhoods. That's the attempt. With staff looking at those bills and the language, a lot of the language that makes it more nebulous is using words like reasonable. Local governments are preempted, but they can set reasonable standards. But those kind of words legally create problems because there is no definition of what is reasonable. One person may think this, a certain amount of traffic is reasonable while another person doesn't. There's other language in there that's very vague and difficult to enforce. And so we basically did that blast, as you said, to neighbors for them to see this kind of bill with links to the bills so they can see for themselves if they determined that it was important for them to engage. But it definitely falls under the area of preemption.
Do you know if anybody called, wrote, emailed, whatever, our legislature?
Mayor and Councilwoman, I know that in Senate Bill 1002, which was in committee yesterday, there were a number of residents from different cities that actually showed up at the legislature. Only 3 testified. They were limited in testimony since they were all opposed. And then this afternoon, since we're here right now, I don't know what the turnout is for 2333, but we did encourage people to email and write if they had concerns after they looked at the bill that was sent to them.
I'm really glad to hear that because this is such a concern that I hear from my constituents all the time, and I'm sure the rest of the council members too, are businesses invading neighborhoods and essentially destroying the peace and security that they know. So thank you, and please keep us advised.
All right, thank you very much. So the recommendation is that based upon our guiding principles that we support our staff position on A through H. Is there any cards on this item? I don't have any cards on this item. Okay, do we have a motion on A through H to support staff position?
Move A through H.
Second.
We have a motion to support staff position on A through H. There is a second. Any additional comments by members of this council? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously. All right, now these are, next section are bills that don't fit neatly into our larger principles. So how are we going to move forward with those, Frank? Or John Wayne, I'm sorry.
So Mayor and Council, thank you for the question. Actually, there are two bills that we believe do support the city principles, and they're letters I and J, that was included in your report. And so we're more than happy to answer any questions you may have.
Are there any questions on I and J? We have a motion supporting staff recommendation on I and J. We have a second. Any additional comments? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes unanimously. All right, and now we're on to K.
Yes, Mayor and Council. So this is the one bill, letter K, that's in your report that does not really fit neatly in the core principles. But to give some background, because this council has supported the Arizona Power Authority. So in a nutshell, the Arizona Power Authority was created in the 1940s to distribute power to not just Arizona, but to other states' power generated at the Hoover Dam. And the city of Phoenix currently receives discounted rates on some electricity that then get passed on to our taxpayers in Phoenix, the cost savings. What they're trying to do in this piece of legislation is trying to codify that they're not subject to the state's procurement laws when they are trying to get contracts done for construction or other work. They fall under federal laws. They fall under other type of procurement codes that are more at the federal level, not state level, and that's how they've been running since the 1940s. This wasn't an issue until recently when the auditor's department said, well, they've always been independent of state procurement. It never was codified in state law. So they were asking support for this measure since we're partners with the Arizona Power Authority. And really, it doesn't change their practice because they still have a procurement code. It's just not the state one. It's more federal standards.
So you're recommending that we support HB 2114 as a good, they've been a good partner to us, and we want to be a good partner to them? Is that?
Mayor and Council, we recommend support. They are partners in this, and we never want to see them get into any kind of litigation that may impact the contracts and agreements we have that our taxpayers benefit.
We have a motion on item K on staff's recommendation.
Move item K.
Second.
We have a motion in favor of the staff recommendation on K. We have a second. Any comments by members of this council? All in favor say aye. Any opposed? That passes quietly yet unanimously. Next on our agenda is information as it relates to the 2020 census, which was a subject matter of discussion. It is apropos that we had a budget discussion before, and now we have a census discussion now because those are intertwined. If we do well on the census, it will affect our budget in a big way, and if we don't, it will really affect our budget in a very negative way. So I think the first item on our federal agenda is a discussion of early planning for the 2020 census.
Mayor and Council, let me introduce Clark Princell, our Director of Federal Affairs, to review the item.
Mayor and Council, we are proposing that we add a federal agenda item on the 2020 census. The Census Bureau intends to encourage all respondents to complete electronic submissions. Over the next 10 years, Phoenix could lose up to 23,000 per Phoenix resident not counted in the census. Staff recommends adding to the federal agenda, ensure that the Census Bureau has the necessary funding and other resources to conduct a complete and accurate count in the city of Phoenix and the state of Arizona for the 2020 decennial census.
Okay, thank you for that report. So the request is that what is the request? We're just adding this to our agenda? Okay.
Correct. This is not in the agenda that was approved in December, so we're adding this item.
Councilwoman.
And I just want to remind everyone, they're doing it electronically, and there are still people that don't have access. So I think we need to make a statement to the federal government, while this may be a great way to do it, we have to be concerned about people that don't have access to electronic devices, however you want to state it.
Mayor?
Thank you. Was that to that point?
Yeah,
Vice Mayor.
what are we doing? Or who answers?
Mayor, members of the council, so as we discussed in our policy session previously, we are working with the Census Bureau to understand the timeframes that we're dealing with. The first item coming up that we require action on is to name a complete count committee, which we've done in previous decennial censuses, and that complete count committee would help us and advise us regarding community outreach and media outreach and so forth. Another very important aspect of what we'll be doing is brainstorming and doing outreach around access to technology, to the point that Councilwoman Stark raises.
Thank you. Councilman Williams?
I have a real concern, in addition to what was just mentioned, is we have such a large homeless and transient population. I'm hoping that this committee that you're going to put together can really come up with some creative ideas that we can get enough trust, whether it's through city staff or community outreach, churches, social services, whatever, to get a better count than we've had in the past, because I think that's a very large number, and we spend a lot trying to meet their needs. So it's very important in the future that we don't lose any revenue.
Thank you very much. By the way, college students count too. And we've had a huge growth in number of college students that put their head on a pillow at night inside the city of Phoenix, downtown and at Grand Canyon and Arizona Christian, some of the other universities. So we got to make sure we have some new ideas about how to count those kids, because that's really important too. All right, other comments or questions? Was there a motion in favor? Okay, please, Vice Mayor.
I make the motion to add the 2020 census to the federal agenda.
Second.
There is a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Any opposed? Aye. That was Councilman Nowakowski, sounds like? Okay, so it was passed unanimously. Is that it for today?
That's it, Mayor and Council. The only other thing we'll add is that we're setting up one-on-ones to do briefings in the interim between these policy briefings to keep you up to speed, because now bills are moving very quickly. And so we're calling the offices, and if you're interested in briefings, we're setting them up.
All right, excellent. By the way, on the census, it's a unique opportunity for City of Phoenix to work with State of Arizona, because as we have a huge interest in making sure all of our residents are counted, State of Arizona make sure that we have the highest state count possible for both federal budget reasons, and again, as I mentioned, we get our appropriate number of congressional districts, and that'll be based upon the census. So we should be working together, city, state, in a bipartisan way, because we all have an interest in making sure that everyone gets counted. There be no further business for the City Council. Today's meeting is adjourned.